Good morning and welcome everyone to another episode of Bridging the Human Divide. My name is Shera Sever. I'm an organizational, cultural, and leadership consultant, a change maker, business and life mastery coach. I work with organizational and community leaders on their social architecture. That is, creating a transparent, aligned culture, strategies and courses focused on leadership development, social, and planetary wellness. I'm the founder of Igniting the Spark and the Community Resiliency Project. Bridging the Human Divide is a series of weekly conversations with everyday change makers committed to moving from polarization to the understanding of divergent perspectives in our communities, workplaces, organizations, and personal relationships. The intent is to invite all to gather around the fire of collective heart intelligence so that we can all move forward with more grace, understanding, dialogue, and engaged compassion in action. Normally this would be a Facebook Live, but we have encountered a lot of technical difficulties today. But I do want to welcome my guest, Will Chang, who is the founder and director of the Absolute Center, a spiritual healing center based in Marin County, California. He's a visionary, optimistic, working towards world peace. He was the producer of MasterPeace 2001 at Stanford University and has been a transformational teacher and life coach for over 25 years. Will is a great believer in Pierre Theilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit prophecy that says one day a web will encompass the world, and that one word would instantaneously change the world. Will's belief is that one word is aloha. So please join me today with Will as we take a deep dive into what is aloha and how can we embrace the practices of aloha in our everyday life. So welcome, Will Chang. And here you are in our without the camera, but the show must go on. So
the show must go on. Aloha
for being part of this conversation. We've talked about it for quite some time to have you on the show. So why don't we just start with telling us a little bit about your work and the Absolute Center.
Well, I think I have been a transformational coach, as you say, for 25 years. So I'm deeply dedicated to the idea that we can bring world peace as we are light workers into the world. I have found with the Absolute Center, the inspiration came from having to find a new email address. And I decided I am at the Absolute Center would be a very finite place. And so that became the birth of the Absolute Center. Now, in the Absolute Center, to be in the Absolute Center, one has to embrace the totality of the universe. Everything that exists, everything that we can conceive, everything is in the Absolute Center, otherwise it wouldn't be absolute, right? So, a little exercise here is to be in the Absolute Center requires you to embrace the totality of the universe. So if you just stretch your mind out to the farthest ends, right, and stretch it out the other side, because it's equidistant, completely up and down, north, south, your sphere of 360 degrees, when you do that, when you expand your consciousness to embrace the totality of it, then you bring it down to yourself because you're the access point. You're the loci of the absolute center. So where do you hold that? You hold that center right in your dantian. Now, the dantian is the root of the umbilical cord. That's where you began your breathing in the womb. So that's your beginning point.
That's
so everyone
let's take a pause here. That sounds great before we go much further, because that's a lot of information to take in. So the I am absolute center came because you were looking for an email address. I love that coincidence or that synchronicity, how trying to solve one problem actually led to a massive solution and the birth of the absolute center. What I'm hearing you say is that what is the absolute center? It's not only a physical place and now an online place based in Marin County, California, but it's a state of being that I'm hearing we can access through extending our consciousness, is what I'm hearing you say, to the infinite realms of the universe. Did I get that right?
Absolutely, because it's all about discovering spirit within ourselves, our connection to spirit. And once I played a little game of being God for a day, and I found that it was impossible for me in my mind to really contain all of which God supposedly does in a day, right? It's just too busy. But the only way I could contain God was in my heart. And then with that openness, and then breathing into it, which is the primal breath, was really how I was able to bring spirit alive within me with that eternal connection.
Yes, I love that. I've had a number of the guests on the show, Bridging the Human Divide, mention the importance of just starting with breath and then using it in so many different ways, depending on what the situation is. So, the topic of the series is Bridging the Human Divide. So what I'd like to hear is, what do you think are some of the causes of the divide and the polarization that we find in so many different, in our communities, many different areas of our country, and even the world? I mean, we have to admit, it's really clear to everybody that we are in deeper polarization than I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. What are the causes from your perspective, Will?
Well, I think, one, for me, we have a lot of lip service to spirit, mind, and body. We only give lip service to spirit because we really just are more interested in the mind and the body. And that's why my work is to promote the integration of spirit in everyday life. To me, when you integrate spirit, mind, and body, as we have earlier spoke of, that's a sense of enlightenment. That is everyday enlightenment. That is letting spirit come through us to act, and whereby we look at what has caused the human divide here at this time. We've lost land, that we can call home. And so people are immigrants. They're lost out there, and they're not having community. And without community, they can't practice the spiritual connection that they have had in other times. So there's been,
when that so much resonates with my human experience, actually, about the importance of home and the importance of community. So I'm hearing what you're saying is that one of the reasons for this intense polarization that we're experiencing now is a disenfranchisement, if you will, of mind, body, spirit, so separation of that rather than integration. But you also mentioned not having a sense of home as it relates to the land. Can you tell me more about that?
we live in our modern world of concrete and electricity. All of this helps to cut away our connection to the natural rhythm of the earth. And we're no longer agrarian, so we're living in these cement jungles. Returning to the stillness of the land helps bring us back to ourselves and to our connection with the divine. So that, I think, is a very important practice for individuals to be able to ground and center and be themselves fully. Because otherwise, the environment that we have created is a highly charged economic rat race. And we are not winning that because capital lust is really killing us. So we need to find a way back to ourselves.
And having the land having that relationship with land, there is so much now, especially with, well, let's just take it home. Northern California, Southern Arizona, Northern New Mexico, Colorado, just in this country, the massive fires that we're experiencing. And then I recently looked at a NASA map and saw that about 1/3 of the planet is actually on fire right now. The land,
that's amazing.
Land mass of the entire planet. So it's not just about forest management in Northern California. But what is happening as a result, there's people that are nomadic in this country that have never had that experience before. So they're having this the experience of a refugee, if you will, one that is being pushed out of their home for whatever reason, a climate disaster, a political disaster, and not having a place that they can call home. I'm noticing now a congregation or a movement. It's a movement of these people gathering in different places in their vehicles or whatever, their tiny homes.
The van life.
What's that?
The van life.
Yeah, the van life. But it's a whole new way of coming back to exactly what you're saying, Will, and that is, what is our relationship to the land here? And, almost coming back to indigenous practices. And I think that's what leads us again a little bit deeper into our topic, which is really, it's about Aloha, because I've known you for many years now, well, at least 15, maybe 20. We've intersected in a lot of different communities and have been part of the forgiveness conferences for a number of years. And I always admired how you embodied what I call Aloha, or the practice of Aloha, or the spirit of Aloha. And I would really love it if you could share a little bit, like kind of tie in our theme of how do you bridge the human divide, have this relationship with land and community using Aloha. And tell us, what is Aloha?
All right, this is my favorite subject. Okay. I mean, aloha. Aloha. In the original Hawaiian, it says alo, to be in the present, and ha is the divine breath. So when you say aloha, it's the same as namaste, because we recognize that the divine breath makes us all divine. So when we say aloha, we're recognizing that you are divine and I am divine, and we are sharing this breath. That's the very root and essence of what aloha is. And aloha is everywhere in the islands. You remember now, if you live on an island, you're contained. That's all there is. So you have to be able to find harmony on that little island. So that's the first step about aloha is harmony. Harmony with your surroundings, harmony with your relationships. So that's where aloha begins to go deeper and deeper.
Let's pause
I'd like to tell you,
because first of all, I've spent a lot of time on not just the Hawaiian Islands, but on probably 30 other islands in different parts of the world. I guess you could call me an island girl or aspiring one.
Fabulous.
So, and I hear you. There's a just it because of the land and because of the geography, you are inherently part of a collective. And
Yes.
what I want to hear, because this is like your teaching. How do you establish this way of being, this harmony?
Okay.
Go for it.
Let me tell you a story.
I love stories. Go for it.
Okay. My cousin Tony, whom I loved very dearly, he's passed away now, had come to visit me from Hawaii. And as I was telling him how I had codified my transformational work under the title of Tao of Aloha, he said, there are many definitions of Aloha. And he said, well, let me tell you a story. One day, I was working in my office, and I got a phone call from Alvin Shim, who was one of my mentors. And he said, can I come by and visit you? I've got some business I'd like you to take care of for me. Now, Tony was a state senator in Hawaii's legislature.
Okay.
And so when Alvin came by, he gave Tony a piece of paper and it said, I'd like you to introduce this legislation. And Tony opened up the envelope, looked at it, and said, oh, my goodness. It said, the spirit of Aloha law. And it went down and enumerated what Aloha, the values of Aloha meant. And A was for akahai, which is unit with its kindness. Kindness with tenderness.
Akahai.
And the second,
Okay.
akahai.
We'll put that in the comment section when I post this so that others can benefit from that. So,
Okay.
I love it.
L is for lokahi, meaning unity to be expressed with harmony. O is for olu olu, meaning agreeable, to be expressed with pleasure.
Mm.
H is for ha'a, meaning humility, to be expressed with modesty. And the final A is ahonui. And ha'onui means patience, to be expressed with perseverance.
You know, I love that, Will, because I've done some recent studies with an indigenous leader from the Lakota lineage. And, you know, I noticed that to be true of just all native peoples. Just what you just described about aloha is actually, those are some leadership qualities that are inherent among indigenous peoples, I think all over the world. So we will get that in the comments. I want to make sure we get that in as a little lesson, just a reminder of these qualities, and that this simple 5-letter word of aloha, it's almost like a mantra, right?
Oh, definitely.
It embraces these qualities. So,
but it gives us, it gives us a way in which to approach our relationships, to check ourselves. Because one of the first things that Queen Liliuokalani had said was that you don't say aloha if you don't mean it. So if your feelings in your heart are not kind, if you are not there at that point where you feel the aloha within yourself, you need not speak aloha. So it's a way of clearing within ourselves and finding those values to express and to share in that manner.
You know, that's really interesting to hear it. When I first heard aloha, and I was probably very young, the translation that was shared with me was love. And yes, love is a quality of aloha, but I'm hearing that there's love and is what I'm hearing you share with us.
Let me share with you the writings of Queen Liliuokalani, who was our last monarch, said about aloha. Okay, it's very short.
I would love to hear that. Go ahead.
All right. Wherever the native Hawaiian went, he said aloha in meeting or in parting. Aloha was a recognition of life in another. If there was life, there was mana, goodness, and wisdom. And if there was goodness and wisdom, there was a God quality. One had to recognize the God of life in another before saying aloha. But this was easy. Life was everywhere. In the trees, the flowers, the ocean, the fish, the birds, the pili grass, the rainbow, the rock. In all the world was life, was God, was aloha. Aloha in its gaiety, joy, happiness, abundance. Because of aloha, one gave without thought of return. Because of aloha, one had mana. Aloha had its own mana. It never left the giver, but flowed freely and continuously between giver and receiver. Aloha could not be thoughtlessly or indiscriminately spoken, for it carried its own power. No Hawaiian would greet another with aloha unless he felt it in his own heart. If he felt anger or hate in his heart, he had to cleanse himself before he said aloha.
That is so rich and so deep. I love that. Maybe I'd like to share a little bit of that too in some of the comments once we post this. So now let's bring it to today, 2020. All right, where again, bridging the human divide. We're experiencing more polarization than ever, more climate disaster than ever. We've got COVID. There's polarization around the causes and the reasons and all of this. So I want to bring aloha to the mainland. I want to bring aloha not just to our mainland, but just globally. So how, as a non-Hawaiian, as a human being, as someone with spirit, or ha, as you say, how can we use the depth of aloha in our daily lives right now to depolarize? Go for it.
It really comes down to practice of knowing those values again, because in all our interactions, we have an opportunity to choose how we react. And if I want to be practicing aloha, and I know that's what I have to do and want to do, then I'm going to check myself off with kindness. Do I begin with kindness?
So we're going to start with kindness.
And then
kindness towards self as well.
Yeah, with myself, so that I can extend this kindness and see the other person with kindness. Now, I have relationships that are difficult. I provide care for my sister, and you know how sibling relationships can be difficult. And I have to look at that with aloha. I have to say, am I in a moment of kindness? Can I act in a moment of kindness here? So I think when we start going through the different values of aloha, that helps us to filter our own reactions and how we present ourselves. You said at the beginning that I exemplified aloha. I think this is a practice to exemplify aloha within each of us, so that when others see us, then they're touched by it and they ask, what is aloha? And we can share.
I love that. So it's almost like, again, and this is what leadership is about as well. It's what awakening is about. It's self-awareness, but self-checking is what I'm hearing. Like in some of the Vipassana practices I've done, we do a scan. And scan to find out where there's conflict, where there's constriction, where am I out of integrity with self and, embodied. So tell me again, the 5, just so we can share this with our listeners, the 5 values of aloha, because this is like the first step to depolarization, is a self-check. And those 5 values once again are?
A is for akahi, which is kindness.
Okay.
Kindness as in dealing with, if you're working with white gloves, you leave no print. So there's that real tenderness. Then the second L, the L is for lokahi, which is unity. So when we can think in terms of all together, and then we want to find harmony. And O is for olu, meaning agreeable, me being pleasant. And H is for ha'a'aha, meaning humility, to be expressed with modesty.
With modesty, I love that. Yeah, that's so important.
And the last A is for ahonui, which is patience expressed in perseverance, waiting for the right moment to act. I would also recommend that people go on Google and find Pono Shim. Pono is the son of Alvin Shim, and he is the wisdom keeper for this knowledge. This knowledge, there's a wonderful story about where this comes from. This wisdom comes from Auntie Pilahi Pake, who was a Hawaiian poet, philosopher, teacher, all of the wisdom. She was the wisdom keeper.
Oh,
she was the keeper of the
sound, Will.
Am I still there?
Yeah, go ahead. We got a
Can you hear
couple
me
more
now?
minutes.
All right, okay. But she had first announced this to the Governor's Conference on Hawaii's Future, Hawaii 2000, in 1970. And at the end of the conference, she went up to the stage, and she said that one day, Hawaii, the world, will be in crisis, and Aloha will save the world. So
I love that.
We are at that time.
And even if those of us in urban cities or in urban areas and cities or quarantined, can we take this sacred practice really from the Hawaiian culture, from the islands, and can we bring it into our land, our areas, our neighborhoods? And I just want to mention too, I think it's really important, and you mentioned it in the early part of our conversation, that one of the reasons for the divide is because we've become separate from our land. It's so important to honor those that have come before us on the land that holds us and on which we now stand. So that aloha practice and attitude, embracing of values, is not just extended out to others, it's also extended into our relationship with the land on which we stand.
Aloha Aina is the philosophy of the islands, that you are connected to the land, and the land supports you. That's the relationship. We've lost that in our urban environment, in our urban cultures, unfortunately. And we need to, what I like to practice is the seat of sovereignty. And the seat of sovereignty is merely when we sit in a lotus position, and on the land is the best place. But there, when we sit there in silent stillness, we are showing that we are at one with nature and with the universe.
Yeah, I love that, Will. The sovereignty is a big topic these days. When I've been having some of these conversations about bridging the human divide, and just the polarization, it's sovereignty keeps coming up, and I think it's really important to make distinguish what sovereignty is and isn't. It's not you stay on your side of the street and I stay on mine. That is not sovereignty. Sovereignty is having this just as you've been talking, this alignment with one's own personal integrity, um, as well as being aware of the impact that you are having on others and on the land on which you walk. So, if you want to speak a little bit more about sovereignty, please do. But it's a hot topic these days.
Well, I think sovereignty comes with responsibility.
Thank you.
To know that you have, again, you are a conduit of spirit, and all of which you possess is at your fingertips to be used in an inspiring, creative, and helpful way. That's how you can take your authority, take your sovereignty, and put it to the best use, right? How do I make the world a better place? Me, myself, and I is when I come to my sovereignty. I'll be, at equilibrium. I will be open, and I will be loving. So that in itself, because we never know what circumstances come up in any moment, but to be able to engage and co-create and to bring the best that we have into any situation always changes it. I like to say that we are a note in the music of the universe, right? We can be a clear note, or we can be a quarter note. But the idea is that when we as a note come in contact in a chord with another note, we can form a chord.
I love that.
And that's how the music starts.
Yeah, so I'd rather be a whole note than a quarter note. We're about out of time here, but I know that you have that great appreciation for music too as a ukulele player. So any last minute, I always like to say, any last minute tips or practices that our listeners can put into their magic backpack as we navigate some of the most difficult and challenging times that we've faced in this generation?
I really found my aloha coming back to me in a very different way when I picked up a ukulele. And I discovered from joining a band, a ukulele group, that the aloha is in the music. It's in the songs. It's in the language. It's in the sharing. So that to me is a secret weapon. Get yourself a ukulele and start singing. It's amazing. Yeah. And you'll discover you.
Yeah, I would say just to add, to bring a little aloha into your life and to share aloha with others, no matter where you're at. If you can't get a ukulele, at least a little humming, right?
Well, it's also sharing food, it's the flowers, it's everything that we love about Hawaii. And just bring that into your life, into your heart, into your surroundings, and carry. That's the thing. Carrying aloha is very easy. It's all in your heart.
It is all in our hearts. Thank you so much, Will. I have ukulele on my bucket list. So thank you for joining us. I will definitely share some of the wisdom that in our comments on Facebook. This recording will also be on YouTube. And I've got a couple more episodes left to Bridging the Human Divide. One of our guests will be, future guests will be Kim Kismick, who has founded a couple of different community centers in Northern California and has been very active in, as I call her, a sacred activist, just in community work and really contributing to polarization. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Apologize for the technical difficulties. We couldn't do it live today and couldn't even get Will on the camera, but hope you enjoyed our conversation. You can learn more about Will by going to his website, which is theabsolutecenter.com. And aloha to all of you. Bye-bye.
Aloha.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1, switch 40-1. Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1, switch 40-1.